It's just better if she doesn't know. My son Mark's voice was a low rumble from the kitchen. I had just come down the stairs, my old knees popping softly on each step. I was going to ask if anyone wanted more iced tea. My hand froze on the doorway. The linoleum felt cold under my slippers. "She'll just worry," my daughter Susan added. Her voice was thin, like a wire. "All that stress isn't good for her. The doctor said it's slow growing anyway." A buzzing started in my ears, louder than the hum of the old refrigerator. I heard the clink of a spoon against a coffee mug. Slow growing what? My last checkup was 2 months ago. Dr. Adams had patted my hand and said my blood pressure was a little high, nothing to fuss over. He said I was healthy as a horse for 72. And the cost, Mark sighed. The treatments, the specialists. Medicare won't cover all of it. We'd have to sell the house. My house, the one my husband, Frank, and I built with our own hands. I backed away from the door, silent as a shadow. I turned and went back up the stairs, my heart beating a sick, heavy rhythm against my ribs. In my room, I sat on the edge of my bed, pulling the old wedding quilt up to my chin, even though the afternoon was warm. The scent of cedar from my hope chest filled the air. They were talking about my life as if it were an old car that cost too much to fix. The next morning, Susan brought me breakfast in bed. A single, wobbly pancake on one of my good china plates. A smear of jam sat next to it like a sad apology. The coffee was weak. "Morning, Mum," she said, her smile too bright. "We just wanted you to rest today." "That's thoughtful, dear," I said. I looked at the drooping carnations she'd stuck in a water glass on my nightstand. They smelled faintly of chemicals. "Did Dr. Adams's office call back about my test results?" Susan's smile tightened. "Oh, no news is good news, right? Mark is going to fix that leaky faucet in your bathroom today. You just relax." She patted my hand. Her skin was cool and dry. Later, I heard Mark banging around under the sink. He came out, wiping his hands on a rag. "All fixed, Mom. Good as new." "Thank you, Mark. You're a good son," I said. The words felt like ash in my mouth. He just nodded, not meeting my eyes. He was already looking at his phone. The happy music from some game show drifted up from the living room television. My children were so busy being helpful. They were so busy waiting. That afternoon, I went into my sewing room. The sun streamed through the window, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. I ran my hand over the quilt I was making for my newest grandbaby. Little squares of soft yellow and blue cotton. My fingers traced the tiny, even stitches. My eyes landed on a framed photo on the wall. It was of Mark and his wife, standing in front of their first house. They looked so young and happy. I remembered the day they signed the papers. I had sat with them at their kitchen table, the one they bought second-hand, and wrote a check for $20,000 for the down payment. "We'll pay you back, Mom," Mark had promised, his eyes shining. "Every single penny." I had just waved my hand. "It's not a loan. It's a gift. Just be happy." They never did pay it back, of course. I never expected them to. But sitting there, with the gentle whir of my sewing machine in the quiet room, I did the math. $20,000, 25 years ago. It was a lot of money. It was probably enough to see a specialist. The words came back to me, clear as a church bell on a Sunday morning. It's just better if she doesn't know. I spent the evening looking through old photo albums. The plastic pages crinkled as I turned them. There was Susan, beaming in her cap and gown from business school. A proud day. Her husband, Tom, had lost his job that year. They were going to pull her out for the last 2 semesters. I wouldn't allow it. I took the money from Frank's life insurance. It was supposed to be for my own security, for my old age. An education is something no one can ever take from you, I had told her. She cried and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. She finished her degree with top honours. My phone rang, startling me. It was Susan. "Just checking in, Mum," she said. "Did you have a nice quiet day?" "Lovely, dear," I said, my voice smooth as butter. "I was just looking at your graduation photos." There was a tiny pause. "Oh," she said. "That was a long time ago." "Yes, it was," I said, closing the album. The smell of old paper and glue hung in the air. "You sleep well, Susan." I hung up before she could say anything else. I knew what she was really asking. She was asking if I was feeling weaker today. The next morning, the dull ache in my side was back. The one Mark said was probably just a pulled muscle from gardening. The one Susan said was my arthritis acting up. I knew now it was a liar's pain. It was the thing they didn't want to pay for. I walked over to my old roll-top desk. The wood was warm and smooth under my fingers. I pulled out the heavy phone book for the county. My hands didn't even shake. I flipped past the pages for our town, all the way to the listings for Cedar Creek, 30 miles away. My finger stopped on a name. Cedar Creek Women's Health Pavilion. I picked up the heavy black receiver of my landline phone. The dial tone hummed in my ear, a steady, determined sound. When the receptionist answered, her voice was young and cheerful. "Cedar Creek Health, how can I help you?" "I'd like to make an appointment for a new patient," I said. My own voice sounded calm. It sounded strong. "As soon as you can." "Of course. And the name?" I didn't hesitate. "Helen," I said. "Helen Smith." It was my mother's name. It felt right. It felt like a shield. The day of my appointment, I told Susan I was going to the library for their senior book club meeting. It was a small lie, easy to swallow. "Do you want me to drive you, Mum?" she asked. She was wiping the kitchen counter with a sponge, her movements quick and impatient. The air smelled of lemon cleaner. "No, thank you, dear. The walk will do me good." I took the county bus instead. The vinyl seat was cracked and cool against my legs. The bus sighed and hissed at every stop. I watched my town roll by the window, the familiar houses and shops. Then we were on the highway, and the world became green fields and telephone poles. I clutched my purse on my lap. Inside was my Medicare card and a small notebook where I had written down my symptoms. The bus smelled of diesel fumes and damp wool. It felt like freedom. The Cedar Creek Health Pavilion was all glass and cool, quiet air. It smelled new, like fresh paint and clean carpets. A young woman with a kind smile took my name. It felt strange to say Helen Peterson again after using my mother's name on the phone. The doctor was a woman, younger than my own daughter, Dr. Ramirez. She had dark, serious eyes. She didn't pat my hand or call me dear. She just listened. I told her everything, even the part about the ache in my side that my family dismissed. "We need to get a clear picture," she said, her voice calm and steady. "I'm ordering a new set of tests, blood work, a scan. We'll get to the bottom of this, Helen." "My records are with my doctor back home," I said, my voice a little shaky. "That's fine," she said, making a note on a chart. Sometimes a fresh set of eyes is exactly what's needed. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. It was small, but it was warm. I got home just before dinner. The bus dropped me at the corner, and I walked the last 2 blocks. The scent of my neighbour Carol's rose bushes hung heavy in the humid afternoon air. Mark was in the driveway, polishing his new car. The red paint gleamed in the sun. He looked up when he saw me. Hey, Mom, you look tired, he said. That book club wear you out? A little, I said, leaning on the railing as I climbed the porch steps. It was a very dramatic story. He laughed, a short, sharp sound, and went back to his car. The television was on inside. The sound of a game show host shouting filled the quiet house. I went straight to my room and closed the door. I sat on my bed, the old quilt cool beneath my hands, and just breathed. A few days later, a nurse from Dr. Ramirez's office called. I saw the Cedar Creek number on the caller ID and took the phone into my bedroom, shutting the door. My heart thumped against my ribs like a trapped bird. The doctor would like to see you to discuss the results, the nurse said. Her voice was professional, giving nothing away. Can you come in tomorrow afternoon? Yes, I said. Yes, I can. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Mark's voice in my head. The cost. We'd have to sell the house. And Susan's. It's just better, if she doesn't know. I got out of bed and went to my desk. I opened the bottom drawer. Under a stack of old tablecloths was a metal box. Inside were the papers. Mark's $20,000 gift. Susan's tuition, all itemized from the bank statements. The ink was faded, the paper soft with age. It was all there. I touched the crisp edges of the old documents. They didn't feel like gifts anymore. They felt like invoices. My neighbor, Carol, was in her garden, snipping deadheads from her petunias. She's a retired nurse, a widow like me. She has common sense, which is in short supply these days. Carol, do you have a minute for some tea? I called over the fence. She looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun. For you, Helen? I've got all the time in the world. I brought the tea tray out to my patio. The porcelain cups rattled softly in their saucers. The steam from the teapot smelled of bergamot. I told her everything. The conversation in the kitchen, the secret appointment, the phone call. She listened, her face serious, her hands wrapped around her warm mug. When I was finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked me right in the eye. Helen, what those children of yours did is just plain wrong. I know, I whispered. So, she said, setting her cup down with a firm click. What's our next move? Ah. She said ah. A tear I hadn't known was there slid down my cheek. Carol drove me to the appointment in her sensible sedan. The car smelled faintly of cinnamon gum and clean upholstery. She didn't chatter. She just drove, her hands steady on the wheel. It was a comfort. We sat together in Dr. Ramirez's office. The room was painted a soft blue. The paper on the exam table crinkled under my hands. The doctor came in and sat across from us, not behind her big desk. She held a folder. Her face was serious, but not grim. The tests show a growth on your left ovary, Helen, she said, her voice direct. It's a carcinoma, but it's early, stage 1. It is very, very treatable. Carol let out a breath I didn't realize she'd been holding. I just nodded. I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was real. I wasn't imagining the pain. I wasn't just old. What's the treatment? Carol asked, all business. The nurse in her had taken over. We'll need to do surgery, followed by a course of chemotherapy as a precaution, Dr. Ramirez explained. She handed me a glossy brochure with diagrams. It's the standard of care, and the success rate is very high. She also handed me a sheet of paper with the estimated costs. The numbers were large. They made my stomach clench. On the way home, we stopped at a little diner off the highway. It was the kind of place with red vinyl booths and thick, heavy coffee mugs. The air smelled of bacon and brewing coffee. Well, Carol said after the waitress left. That's good news, all things considered. It is, I said, tracing a circle on the condensation of my water glass. Treatable is a wonderful word, but I couldn't stop thinking about the numbers on that paper. It was more than my social security check would cover in 5 years. "What are you thinking, Helen?" Carol asked gently. I looked out the window at the trucks rumbling by. "I'm thinking about my children. They made a business decision about my health. I suppose I can too." I opened my purse and took out the old folded papers from the metal box. I smoothed them on the table next to the salt shaker. "I think it's time to call in my loans." The next day, I went to my bank downtown. The marble floors clicked under my good shoes. It smelled the same as it always had, like old paper and floor polish. I had an appointment with Mr. Henderson, a kind man who had helped Frank and me with our mortgage 30 years ago. I laid the old documents on his big, polished desk. "I need to know what these would be worth today," I said, "with a reasonable rate of interest. Not as gifts, but as personal loans." He studied them, his glasses perched on his nose. "This will take a little while to calculate, Helen." Just then, my phone buzzed in my purse. It was Susan. "Mom, where are you?" she asked. "Mark was going to bring over some groceries. He said you weren't home." Her voice was tight with annoyance. "I had an errand to run, dear," I said calmly. "Well, you should have told us. We worry," she said. It sounded like a complaint. "You're not getting any younger, you know." "I am perfectly fine, Susan. I will see you when I get home." I ended the call and looked at Mr. Henderson. He was pretending not to have listened. "Take all the time you need," I told him. Carol had a friend who was a lawyer, a woman named Ms. Albright. Her office was in a restored brick building and smelled of old books and strong coffee. I sat in a comfortable leather chair. I had the new figures from the bank in my purse. They were impressive. I told Ms. Albright the whole story. I left nothing out. She listened without expression, her pen making small, sharp notes on a yellow legal pad. "So, what is it you want me to do?" she asked when I finished. "2 things," I said. "First, I want you to draft letters to my son and daughter requesting repayment of their debts, with interest. Second, I need to update my healthcare directive. I want to remove my children and name my neighbour, Carol, as my proxy." Ms. Albright raised an eyebrow. "Are you certain, Helen? This will change your relationship with them forever." I looked down at my hands, resting on my purse. They were old hands, spotted and wrinkled, but they were steady. I looked back at her, and my voice was clear as a bell. "My children planned for my death to be cheap. I'm planning for my life to be worth living." That evening, Susan showed up with a casserole. The smell of baked cheese and tomato sauce filled my kitchen. It was her way of checking on me, of managing me. "I brought you dinner," she said, placing the hot dish on my counter, "so you don't have to cook." "That was kind of you," I said. I was arranging flowers from my garden in a vase. The cool stems felt slick in my fingers. She watched me for a moment. "You've been quiet lately, Mum. Secretive. If something's wrong, you can tell us, you know. It's better that we know." There it was, that phrase. I snipped the end of a rose stem with a sharp little snap. "I'm just fine, Susan," I said, not looking at her. "Just thinking about the future?" I placed the rose in the vase. It stood up straight and tall, a perfect, blood-red bloom. She had no idea. Ms. Albright mailed the letters on a Tuesday. I spent the day in my garden, pulling weeds from around my tomato plants. The sun was warm on my back, and the rich, dark soil felt cool and crumbly in my hands. I worked until my knees ached, then went inside to make a pitcher of lemonade. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. For the first time in a long time, it was a peaceful sound, not the sound of a clock running out. The phone rang just after 5. It was Mark. His voice was loud, stretched tight with anger. "Mum, what is this?" he shouted. "No hello, no how are you? I just got a letter from some lawyer. This is insane. It has to be a mistake." I took a slow sip of my lemonade. The glass was cold and beaded with sweat. "There's no mistake, Mark. It's a bill for the $20,000 I gave you for your house." "Gave me? Mum, that was a gift. You said so yourself." "I did," I said, my voice even. "But circumstances have changed. You and Susan decided my life wasn't a worthwhile expense. So I'm liquidating my assets. And you, my dear, are one of them." There was a stunned silence on the line. I could hear his shallow breathing. "We were just trying to protect you from worry," he finally sputtered. "No," I said, setting my glass down. The sound was a soft click on the wooden table. "You were protecting your inheritance, but I have a new plan for my money. I'm going to spend it on living." I paused, then said the words that had been sitting in my heart for days. "I didn't die. I just stopped being convenient." Susan called an hour later. She was crying. The sound was wet and messy through the phone. "Mum, how could you?" she sobbed. "After everything we've done for you? A lawyer. It's so cruel." I was in the living room, dusting the family photos on the mantelpiece. I ran the soft cloth over a picture of Susan in her graduation gown, the one I had paid for. The frame was cool and smooth. "What's cruel, Susan, is deciding your mother should die from a treatable illness to save a little money." "That's not what we said," she wailed. "We didn't want you to be stressed. All those appointments, the treatments. It's a lot for someone your age." "I'll manage," I said, my voice dry. "I have a new doctor. I have a treatment plan. And soon, I'll have the money to pay for it. If you have any other questions, you can speak to Ms. Albright. Her number is in the letter." I hung up the phone gently and finished my dusting. The house smelled of lemon polish and old memories. The next afternoon, they came together. Mark's shiny red car pulled into my driveway, too fast. They marched up my porch steps, their faces like thunderclouds. I was ready for them. I spoke to them through the locked screen door. "Mom, open the door," Mark demanded. He rattled the handle. "No," I said simply. The fine mesh of the screen made them look blurry, like a memory I was trying to forget. "We can talk just fine like this." "This is crazy," Susan cried, her face puffy. "That neighbor of yours, that Carol, she's put these ideas in your head. She's trying to get your money." "Carol has done nothing but be a good friend," I said. "This was my idea, my decision. You owe me the money. You will pay it back. It's as simple as that." "We'll sell the house before we give you a dime," Mark threatened. I looked at him, at my son, his face twisted with rage. "That is certainly an option," I said. "Now, if you don't mind, I was about to watch my program." I turned and walked away from the door, leaving them standing on my porch. I sat in my favorite armchair and turned on the television. I didn't hear them leave, but after a while, the angry shouting stopped. Later, Carol came over with a container of her famous chicken soup. The rich aroma filled my kitchen. She didn't ask about the confrontation. She just poured the soup into 2 bowls and sat with me at the table. "I signed the new healthcare directive today," I told her, stirring the warm broth. The steam felt good on my face. "Ms. Albright filed it with the county clerk. It's official. You're my proxy now." Carol reached across the table and put her hand on mine. Her skin was warm and dry. "I won't let you down, Helen," she said. Her voice was steady. "I know you won't," I said. We ate our soup in comfortable silence. The ticking of the clock in the hall sounded different now. It sounded like my own heart, beating strong and sure. It was the sound of my life, moving forward. A week later, Ms. Albright called. Her voice was crisp and professional. "Helen, I've heard from your children's attorneys," she said. "They made a lot of noise, but they know you have them cornered. The documents are clear. They've proposed a payment plan. The first installments will be transferred to your account by the end of the month." "Thank you, Ms. Albright," I said. My hand was resting on the cool, smooth wood of my desk. "You're welcome, Helen. You handled this beautifully." After I hung up, I sat there for a moment. Then I picked up the phone again and called Dr. Ramirez's office. "This is Helen Peterson," I said to the cheerful receptionist. "I'd like to schedule my surgery, please." I gave her my insurance information and my credit card number for the deposit. The sound of her typing on the keyboard was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. It was the sound of my own rescue. The night before the surgery, I packed a small overnight bag. I folded my softest nightgown, the blue one with the little flowers embroidered on the collar. It smelled of lavender soap from the sachet in my drawer. I packed my toothbrush, my reading glasses, and the new mystery novel the library book club was reading. The house was so quiet. Each little sound seemed loud. The hum of the refrigerator, a floorboard creaking upstairs. Carol came over with a thermos of chamomile tea. "All set?" she asked, her voice soft. "I think so," I said. We sat at my kitchen table, the one where my children had made their decision. The warm ceramic mug felt good in my hands. "You're not scared?" she asked, watching me over the rim of her own cup. I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said, and I was surprised to find it was the truth. "I'm not scared. I'm just busy. I have things to do." She just nodded, understanding completely. The hospital smelled of rubbing alcohol and floor wax. Carol drove me there before the sun was even fully up. The sky was a pale, milky pink behind the trees. Everything was clean and white and quiet. A nurse with a kind face put a plastic bracelet on my wrist. It snapped shut with a final little click. "Helen Peterson," it said. My own name. Carol sat with me in the pre-op room until a man in green scrubs came to get me. The paper gown they gave me was thin and crinkled with every move. "See you in a little while, Helen?" Carol said. She squeezed my hand. Her hand was warm and strong. "You bet," I said. As they wheeled me down the long, bright hallway, I looked up at the ceiling tiles. One after another, they passed over my head. I felt a strange sense of peace. I had done everything I could. The rest was out of my hands. I woke up slowly, like I was swimming up from a deep, dark pool of water. The first thing I heard was a steady, gentle beeping. The first thing I felt was a dull, heavy ache in my middle. My throat was dry. I opened my eyes. The light was dim. Carol was sitting in a chair beside the bed, knitting. The soft click-clack of her needles was the most comforting sound in the world. She looked up and smiled. "Well, hello there, sleepyhead. Welcome back." "Water," I whispered. My voice was a dry rasp. She helped me take a tiny sip from a cup with a straw. It was the best water I had ever tasted. A nurse came in and checked the IV bag hanging by my bed. She fluffed my pillow. Her hands were gentle. Later, Dr. Ramirez stopped by. She stood at the foot of my bed, her face calm. "The surgery went very well, Helen," she said. "We got it all. You're going to be fine." I closed my eyes and let those words wash over me. You're going to be fine. The next day was harder. A physical therapist came to help me get out of bed. Every muscle protested. The short walk to the door of my room and back felt like climbing a mountain. I was leaning on the walker, breathing hard, when my phone buzzed on the little rolling table. It was a text message from Susan. I picked it up with a shaky hand. The screen was too bright. It said, "Mark wanted me to ask if the surgery is done." Not, "How are you, Mum?" Not, "Are you okay?" Just a request for a status update, like I was a package they were tracking. I showed the phone to Carol. She read it, and her lips tightened into a thin line. "Are you going to answer?" she asked. "No," I said. I set the phone face down on the table. I need to save my energy. I took another slow, shuffling step. By the third day, I was sitting in the chair by the window for an hour at a time. I could see the tops of cars in the parking lot and a big oak tree losing its leaves. Carol brought me a fresh nightgown from home and a bag of lemon drops. The sharp, sweet taste was a welcome change from hospital food. A nurse came in with a clipboard. She was all business, but her eyes were kind. "All right, Helen," she said. "Dr. Ramirez has you scheduled to start your first chemotherapy session in 3 weeks. That will give you time to get your strength back at home." It was a date on a calendar, a plan. It was the future. After she left, I asked Carol to hand me my purse. I took out my own hairbrush. The wooden handle was smooth and familiar in my hand. Slowly, carefully, I began to brush my own hair. Each stroke was a small victory. I wasn't just a patient in a bed. I was Helen Peterson, and I was getting ready to go home. Carol drove me home from the hospital on a bright, chilly afternoon. The autumn leaves were skittering across the road. My own house looked strange and wonderful. The scent of my own things, old wood, books, and the faint smell of the last apple pie I'd baked, wrapped around me like a hug. Carol had stocked my refrigerator. Milk, eggs, a roasted chicken. She fussed around, making me a cup of tea, plumping the pillows on my favorite armchair. "You call me if you need anything," she said, her hand on my doorknob. "Anything at all, day or night." "I will," I promised. "Thank you, Carol, for everything." After she left, I just sat in my chair for a long time. The house was quiet. My body ached, a deep, tender ache from the surgery. But it was a healing pain. I picked up the afghan my mother had crocheted and pulled it over my lap. The wool was soft and familiar. I was home. I was safe. And I was in charge. The chemotherapy was in the same building as Dr. Ramirez's office. It was a big, airy room with comfortable chairs and large windows that looked out onto a garden. The first time, Carol went with me. A nurse with gentle hands put the IV in my arm. I watched the clear liquid drip slowly from the bag. It didn't hurt. It just felt cold. I felt a little tired, a little sick to my stomach. But that was all. Other people were there, reading or talking quietly. An older gentleman across from me was working on a crossword puzzle. He looked up and gave me a small, encouraging smile. I smiled back. We were all in the same boat, just rowing our way to the other side. That evening, a bouquet of flowers was delivered to my door. Big, expensive-looking lilies that smelled funereal. The card was from Mark and Susan. "Thinking of you, Mum. Get well soon." There was no apology, no remorse. It was just a thing you do, like sending a card for a birthday. I put them in a vase, but I set them in the back bedroom where I wouldn't have to smell them. A week after my first treatment, my hair started to fall out. It came out in soft clumps on my pillow in the morning, on the collar of my sweater. It was a strange, sad thing. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at my thinning hair. I looked older, frailer. But then I looked into my own eyes. They were the same eyes. They were clear, and they knew what they knew. The next day, Carol took me to a little shop downtown that sold wigs. A kind woman with bright pink lipstick helped me. We tried on bobs and short, curly styles. Finally, I chose one that was very close to my own silver hair, but maybe a little bit sassier. "Well, look at you," Carol said when I came out of the dressing room. "You look like you're about to go on a cruise." I looked at myself in the mirror. I did not look like a sick old woman. I looked like a woman with a plan. I paid for the wig with the credit card that Mark and Susan's money now paid the bill for. It felt right. The first checks from my children had cleared. It was a strange feeling, seeing that money in my bank account. It wasn't a gift. It was a refund. I paid the hospital bill. I paid Dr. Ramirez. I set up an automatic payment for the wig shop. What was left over? I put into a separate savings account. I called it my adventure fund. One afternoon, I was looking through a travel magazine. Bright, glossy pictures of places I had always wanted to see. The coast of Maine. The gardens in Charleston. My children always said travel was too expensive, too tiring for me, too much stress for someone your age. Susan's voice echoed in my memory. I picked up the phone and called the number for a bus tour company that catered to seniors. "I'd like some brochures, please," I said, "for a trip in the spring, somewhere with lots of flowers." The woman on the phone was very helpful. When I hung up, I was smiling. Thanksgiving was approaching. It was always at my house. My job was to do all the cooking and all the cleaning. Their job was to show up, eat, and complain about the traffic on the way over. My phone rang. It was Susan. Her voice was cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "Hi, Mum. Just wanted to check what time we should come on Thursday. And Mark wanted to make sure you're making your sausage stuffing." I was sitting in my armchair, the new travel brochures spread out on the table beside me. The paper was slick and cool under my fingers. "Actually, Susan," I said, my voice calm and pleasant, "I've made other plans for Thanksgiving this year." There was a dead silence on the line. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background at her house. "Other plans?" she finally repeated, as if she'd never heard the words before. "What other plans? It's Thanksgiving." "Yes, it is," I said, "and I'm thankful to be alive. So Carol and I are driving to the coast for a few days. We've booked a little inn by the sea. They're serving a lobster dinner." I paused. "You and Mark will have to figure something out for yourselves." And with that, I hung up. I picked up a brochure for a trip to the Tulip Festival in Holland. The colours were beautiful. Carol and I drove to the coast with the car windows cracked open. The air smelled sharp and salty. My new wig tickled my neck a little, but I felt glamorous. We checked into a small, cosy inn that smelled of wood smoke and cinnamon. Our room had a quilt on the bed and a window that looked right out at the grey, churning ocean. On Thanksgiving Day, we walked on the beach, bundled in our coats. The sand was cold and damp under our shoes. The sound of the waves crashing was a steady, powerful rhythm. It made all my other problems feel small. That evening, we had lobster in the inn's dining room. It was warm, with candles on every table. The lobster was sweet and dripping with butter. It was the best Thanksgiving I had ever had. My phone stayed in my purse the entire time. I didn't know if they called, and I didn't care. When I got home, there was a letter in my mailbox. It was from the church, a formal invitation to the annual Christmas potluck and planning meeting. It was always a big event. I had been in charge of the dessert table for 20 years. My pecan pie was famous. Susan called that night. Her voice was stiff. The church potluck is next week. I assume you'll be making your pies? It wasn't a question. It was a statement. She and Mark always liked to show me off at church, the perfect mother with her perfect pies. No, dear, I said. I was looking at a seed catalogue, dreaming of my spring garden. The glossy pages felt smooth. I've decided to take a step back from my duties this year. I'm just going to attend and enjoy myself. Step back? She said, her voice rising. But everyone expects your pies. What will people think? I imagine, I said calmly. They will think that after 20 years, Helen Peterson deserves to sit down and eat a meal someone else cooked. I closed the catalogue. You're welcome to sign up for the dessert table, of course. I'm sure you have a lovely recipe. Christmas approached. Usually my house would be filled with the scent of pine needles and baking cookies. This year, it was quiet. I put up a small tabletop tree and decorated it with the oldest, most precious ornaments, the ones Frank and I had bought on our honeymoon. One afternoon, Mark showed up unannounced. He had a poinsettia plant in a gold foil pot. He set it on my coffee table. The silence in the room was heavy. Look, Mum, he finally said, not looking at me. This has all gone too far. This lawyer stuff, Thanksgiving. It's not right. We're family. I was knitting a scarf, a soft, cheerful yellow wool. The needles made a soft, clicking sound. Family doesn't decide one of its members is too expensive to keep alive, Mark. It wasn't like that, he insisted. We were just trying to manage things, for your own good. My own good is my business now, I said, my eyes on my knitting. The monthly payments are due on the 1st, just like the lawyer said. Was there anything else? He just stood there for a moment, then turned and left without another word. The poinsettia looked stiff and lonely on the table. The day of the church potluck, I wore a new red sweater and my sassy wig. Carol and I walked in together. The fellowship hall was buzzing with people and smelled of roasted turkey and warm bread. I saw Susan and Mark standing with their spouses near the buffet line. They were watching me. I didn't bring a pie. I brought a bottle of sparkling cider and gave it to the pastor's wife for the beverage table. Then I got a plate and sat down with Carol and some other ladies from my old Bible study group. They told me I looked wonderful. After a while, Susan came over to my table. Her smile was stretched thin as a rubber band. Mum, she said, her voice low. People are asking where your pies are. Are they? I said, taking a bite of green bean casserole. It was delicious. Well, you can tell them I've retired. Her face flushed a blotchy red. She looked over at her husband, Tom, who just shrugged. She was humiliated. It was the quietest, most public revenge I could have imagined. She had wanted everyone to see her as the devoted daughter of a frail old woman. Instead, they just saw a woman whose mother had decided to eat someone else's dessert for a change. Later that evening, Ms. Albright called me at home. Helen, I have the final papers for you to sign, she said, regarding your will. I'll be in tomorrow, I said. The next day, I sat in her comfortable office one more time. The air still smelled of coffee and old books. She slid a thick stack of papers across the polished desk. My last will and testament. It was all very clear. The house and my remaining assets were to be left to a scholarship fund at the local community college in my husband Frank's name. There was a generous bequest for Carol. My children were mentioned by name, each to receive $1, for all the care they have already given me. I picked up the heavy pen. The ink flowed smooth and black. I signed my name at the bottom, Helen Marie Peterson. It was the signature of a free woman. I had paid for my life with the money they thought they had already inherited, and it was worth every single penny. Winter thawed into a wet, hopeful spring. My chemotherapy treatments ended. Dr. Ramirez gave me the news with a warm, professional smile. "You're in remission, Helen. Everything looks clean." Those words were better than winning the lottery. I walked out of her office into the bright sunshine. The air smelled of damp earth and new grass. Carol was waiting in the car. When I told her, she just hugged me, right there in the parking lot. The monthly payments from Mark and Susan continued to arrive in my bank account. They were quiet now. There were no more angry phone calls, no surprise visits, just the silent transfer of funds. It was the only language we had left. I used the money from my adventure fund to book the trip to the Tulip Festival in Holland. Not a bus tour, a real trip for me and Carol. My last act before I left was to put my house on the market. It was too big for me now, full of too many ghosts. I found a lovely little 2-bedroom apartment in a senior community on the other side of town. It had a balcony big enough for a container garden. Mark saw the "for sale" sign in the yard. He called me. His voice was quiet, defeated. "You're selling the house?" "Yes," I said. I was packing my mother's china into a box, wrapping each piece in soft paper. "It's time for me to downsize." "But that's our home," he said, "where we grew up." "It was my home, Mark," I corrected him gently, "and now I'm making a new one." There was nothing else to say. I heard him take a breath, but then he just hung up. I finished packing the china. The plates were cool and smooth in my hands. They were just things. I was ready to let them go. The Tulip Festival was a riot of colour. Reds, yellows, purples, stretching in perfect rows as far as the eye could see. The air was cool and smelled of flowers and fresh waffles. Carol and I walked for miles. We sat at little cafes and drank strong coffee. We took a boat ride down a canal. One afternoon, we were sitting on a bench near a windmill. A young couple was struggling with a stroller and a crying baby. The mother looked exhausted. I walked over to them. "Can I help?" I asked. "I have 4 grandchildren. I know a thing or two about fussy babies." The mother looked at me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Would you?" she asked. "Just for a minute?" I picked up the warm, squirming baby. I rocked him gently and hummed an old lullaby. He quieted down, his little head resting on my shoulder, his tiny hand curled around my finger. The mother watched me, a real smile finally reaching her eyes. "You're a lifesaver," she said. It felt good to be useful, not convenient, just useful. When I got back, my house was sold. The closing was quick and easy. I moved into my new apartment. It was bright and clean and smelled of fresh paint. Carol and some of the ladies from the chemo room helped me unpack. We ordered pizza and drank sparkling cider out of plastic cups to celebrate. My new balcony was my favorite part. I bought pots and soil and seeds. I planted tomatoes and herbs and bright red geraniums. The gentleman from the apartment next door, a retired professor named Arthur, came over to admire them. He had kind eyes and a gentle smile. "I make a terrible cup of tea," he said one afternoon, leaning over the railing, "but I'm told my coffee is passable. Would you care to try some?" "I'd like that very much," I said. My life is quiet now. It's a good kind of quiet. My days are filled with small, happy things. My morning coffee with Arthur, the book club at the community centre, tending my little garden. The monthly payments from my children still arrive, but I barely notice them anymore. They are just a quiet reminder of a life I left behind. Sometimes I get a card from a grandchild for a birthday or a holiday. The handwriting is always theirs, but the words feel like their parents'. I send a nice card and a check back. That's all. This morning, I was out on my balcony, watering my tomatoes. The sun was warm on my face. The air smelled of green, growing things. I could hear the distant sound of church bells from the town I used to live in. I looked out over the rooftops at the bright blue sky. I felt calm. I felt free. I felt respected, mostly by myself. And that, I've learned, is more than enough.